Good evening, everyone. My name is Todd Scholl, and I serve as the Director of Wellness and Communications for the Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. And for short, we call ourselves COOL. And you can find out everything you ever wanted to know about COOL right here on this website at cool.us. That's CEWL.us. I want to invite you to head on over there and check out all the resources that we have, including all the live streams like this one. We post those there along with Pete Stone's videos, along with information on our Cool Induction Institute, Steve Newsom's articles, and a whole host of resources for you to check out. So head on over to cool.us and check out what we have going on. And of course, we would not be here without a grant from the National Education Association and their state affiliate, the SCEA. Right now, the SCEA is in their early enrollment period. So if you are working in a public school in South Carolina, we want to invite you to join the SCEA, and you will pay no dues until September during that enrollment period, early enrollment period. And you can join right now at jointhescea.org. Check out all the benefits that NEA has and learn more about what we do to try to create the kind of schools that all educators, all of our support professionals, and all students deserve. So we want to invite you into that movement. Well, tonight we have two shining stars, and I'm so excited. We had one-on-one conversations with them over in the past year, but I wanted to invite Lisa Ellis and Sylvia Wright, the two Democratic candidates for South Carolina Superintendent of Education, to come on and just share some thoughts. This isn't really a debate, it's more of a conversation. And we want to invite those of you who are watching live. You can post your questions or comments in the Facebook comments, and we may bring those on or not. And of course, I do want to say this this before we start, that an invitation was sent out to Superintendent Ellen Weaver to do a live stream, and that invitation remains open. So Ellen, or if anybody who knows Ellen is watching, and if you'd like to come on and do a live stream, we can do that, and I'd be happy to have you on and ask questions and hear your thoughts and your vision for education in South Carolina in your second term. But I am excited to bring on Lisa Ellis and Sylvia Wright. How are you both doing tonight?
Good.
Great.
Excited.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Yes. Well, I just want to tell you, I'm a huge fan of both of you, and I know that there are a lot of educators out there that are huge fans and trying to make up their minds about, gosh, who am I going to vote for? I mean, we have two really great candidates, and I say that sincerely. You both have such amazing qualities, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you better and to watch your campaigns unfold and to know that you're really fighting for educators and students. I'd like to give you each an opportunity to just introduce yourselves for those folks who may not be familiar. I don't know how they can't be at this point, but we'll start with Lisa. Just an introduction, please.
Good evening, everyone. Todd, thank you so much for organizing this. I think it'll be a great discussion. My name is Lisa Ellis. I'm a 25-year veteran school teacher. I've taught most of my career has been in Richland School District 2, spent some time in Fairfield County School District, and then Richland School District 1. I'm currently at Blythewood High School as the Student Activities Director. We are 4 days out from graduation, 7 days out from the end of the school year for students, and I am tired, ready for a break. In 2018, I started a closed Facebook group, SC for Ed, that very quickly turned into a grassroots advocacy movement with the goal of putting a high quality teacher in every classroom in South Carolina. Spent since 2018 been advocating to improve our public schools, to do what is in the best interest of our students. In 2022, I ran for Superintendent of Education. I lost to Ellen Weaver in the general election, but I was the top vote getter for the Democratic ticket during that time. Since then, like I said, I've been back in the school, back in the classroom, working with students. I've also been teaching an undergraduate class at College of Charleston and a graduate level class also at College of Charleston. And I have a new rescue dog, Sadie Mae. So that's me in a nutshell.
Nice. Thank you, Lisa. Sylvia?
Perfect. Again, I'd like to echo, thank you for this space and opportunity. My name is Sylvia Wright, and I am your candidate for State Superintendent of Education. I've been in education for over 20 years. I've worked on every single level, classroom level, department leader, instructional coach, school coordinator, and a district coordinator. I actually resigned from my district coordinator position to run full-time for State Superintendent of Education because that's how dedicated I am to improving public education here in South Carolina. I'm also working on my Doctor of Education at the University of South Carolina in systems improvement and innovation, because that's what I want to bring to the public school system here in South Carolina. I'm also a proud member of the SCEA. I was the secretary for, or not secretary, I was a secretary for the Dorchester Education Association. So I'm very involved with the Day on the Capitol with the SCEA. Like I said, proud member. I'm a mom and a grandma, so I understand, that need and want for the teachers who are also parents. You want your child or grandchild to have the best educational environment experience. I'm all familiar with that. When I'm also a military wife. When my husband and I first married, he was early enlisted and I was, starting out new teacher. And I know personally how it is I know how it feels to try to struggle on a new teacher's salary. I remember having to eat oatmeal for dinner. I remember having our lights cut off. So improving teacher pay is one of my top priorities because I experienced that low, having to, survive on the low pay. My top priorities, and I know we'll get more into this tonight probably, but expanding early childhood education, universal pre-K for 4-year-olds, school safety, especially student misbehavior, overcrowded classrooms, bullying. Those things are school safety, not just intruders, and also increasing our teacher pipeline. And doing that by partnering with our universities and technical colleges, take away those student loans in exchange for 5 years of teaching here in South Carolina. So that's just my ideas, a little snippet of my vision for improving education here in South Carolina.
All right. Thanks both of you. I'm getting some notifications. Like I need to turn those off. Here, I'm going to start off with a very pragmatic question because I do think some folks think like this. I think it's true, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that Democrats have not won a statewide election in South Carolina in 20 years. I don't know if that was Jim Rex was the last one. Was that Jim Rex?
You're right.
So, how do you envision making this race winnable, and what coalition do you think you need to put together to overcome what has been decades of GOP dominance? And I'll start with Lisa.
I think that, when we talk about education, it should not be a political issue, right? When you talk to people out in South Carolina, most of them talk about education being a priority. And so when you sort of drill down to those conversations, and you talk to them, you realize you have more in common than you do differently. I mentioned earlier being the top vote getter on the Democratic ticket, and what that meant was there was a lot of crossover already from people who traditionally voted Republican or Independent, ended up voting for me because they did believe that education, finding or voting for somebody qualified and ready to do the job, and also a teacher could really make some difference. So I think that, just that name recognition alone will help. The fact that I'm running the race again, I think will help. But my goal is to get out in front of people, regardless of what political affiliation they associate with, and have those conversations. Again, like I said, when you really stop to take a minute to talk to people, everybody wants children to be successful, right? I have yet to meet somebody that says, well, I don't care about the kids in South Carolina. And so once you have those conversations, then you can lead into, well, what priorities do you have for children? And those conversations can lead to, well, here's, what I plan to do with that.
Okay. Thank you. Sylvia.
Yes. So 2-part question. The first part, I'd like to respond by saying the environment is different. Before things would happen and people were like, well, that's happening to them over there, right? So now everyone's being affected. Everybody's paying $5 for gas, right? These high prices for gas. People are losing jobs. So it's personally affecting everyone. So I say that because there's a whole vibe that's different. Because I've traveled all 46 counties and I've been campaigning for 2 years. So I've seen the difference. Rooms where maybe 25 people were the first time I visited the county. Now the room almost has over 100 people. So people are more awake, more politically involved. And so that's number one, that's going to contribute to that change you're talking about. That's put a soft blow to this GOP dominance. The next thing is, as I've been campaigning for 2 years, I've built relationships. I've been in communities more than one time. I don't just go and, do a campaign speech and then I'm gone. I come back to the community. I'm there for picnics. I'm there eating in their restaurants. People call me, not just elected officials. I have just regular citizens that I've met on the trail. They call me and ask me questions about education. Like, for example, the Marlboro County situation that's happening. My phone has been blowing up with community members, parents, people who are concerned about that situation right now. So when we talk about coalitions, my coalitions are with the teachers, with the parents, the community members, those community members who have that clout, who people follow them and they trust what they say because, they've been in the community and they have that trust. So these are the coalitions that I built up. So along with the coalitions, building the relationships with the people in the community and this political environment that we have right now, which I would say is like a blue moon. This is how I'm going to dominate and start receiving those, the higher numbers when it comes to the election, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does seem like the environment is different. And, you know, nationwide, you're just seeing some shifts in some of these places that have been Republican dominated, where maybe, Trump won by 30, 40 points, and now the Republicans only winning by a single digits, or sometimes losing. So it does feel like the environment is changed over the past 4 years. I did want to ask, you had mentioned, Sylvia. I'm going to go to you first. We'll try to switch back and forth as
Of course.
who answers first and second. But you had mentioned something about student behavior, and that has been a big issue. And there's discussions on creating new policies, and we've been talking about it at the SCEA and at Cool a lot about what do we do, and a lot of times the solutions, and this is just my personal view, a lot of times the solutions just look at the symptoms and not really underneath it what are the actual causes and conditions of student misbehavior.
Right.
And my argument is that if we are not taking a look at the system, and we're just looking at how do we get kids to comply better. Well, I mean, what if the data shows that a medication would get them to comply better and lower behavior? Is that the moral, the ethical thing for us to do to kids? And so this idea that we're just going to look at tougher punishments or allowing adults to use force, again, it's not. The issue is very real, and I empathize with teachers who and administrators who are having to deal with these behavioral issues. But I fear that sometimes in this advocacy space and at the State House, we're only looking at symptoms rather than cures. So how do we improve student behavior so that teachers can teach and students can learn? How do we do that most effectively?
All right, so it starts with early childhood education. That's where it starts for me. When we talk about SEL, social emotional learning. And I'm not saying teaching students their behaviors and how to manage them is the end all be all, but it is something that can help minimize some of the behaviors that we're seeing at the middle and the high school level. So, for example, with the social emotional learning, my grandson, he was like, I'm grouchy like the Grinch. I need to take a nap, right? So that's two things. My daughter has taught him, first of all, what it means to be grouchy. And then second, a solution, like a strategy to manage that. And so if we can implement SEL fully, like all schools, because there are some schools, elementary schools that are implementing SEL, the social emotional learning. But if we can implement social emotional learning in our elementary schools, teach students how they're feeling about their behaviors, give them strategies, that's one way, part of my vision for, trying to curb some of the behavior that we're seeing. The second part of that is it goes to what you're talking about. Like we're suspending kids, expelling kids, and they come back with no discussion. So there's no, corrective behavior or conversation. And so one of the things that I want to implement, it's similar to what Charleston County has, is the progressive discipline model. And included in that would be like a mentoring program or restorative justice practices, uh, seeing a mental health counselor, maybe family therapy, family counseling, because that speaks to what you're talking about, how we're just, punishing them for this behavior, but like, what is the root cause of the behavior and how can we address that? Because the goal of this progressive discipline plan is to for them to reflect and grow and change, not just punish. So
Lisa?
that's sort of my vision.
Thank you, Sylvia. Lisa?
Yeah, I think that when we're talking about student discipline, there's a lot of factors that go into it. And we very often, you're exactly right, where we tend to treat the symptoms rather than the root cause. But when you look at why we're doing that, that's what, the role of superintendent of education can actually work to improve. There is a statewide discipline matrix, but it is up to school districts and administrators on how they go through that process. At the very basis, Sylvia's right. We've got to bring social emotional learning back, particularly as when students start their schooling. When you think about 4-year-olds who are starting kindergarten, for the most part, they've been sort of the center of their universe up until then. And now, we've got to start teaching them how to be around other little humans. The second piece of it, when we're looking at discipline, one of the root causes is, academic failure, in the sense of a lot of times the standards that teachers are forced to teach are not developmentally appropriate for the age that they're teaching them. One of my classes, her early childhood, she kept talking about how her principal kept focusing on the rigor of 4-year-olds. And it just made me cringe, because rigor and 4-year-olds should not be used even in the same conversation, right? And so, we have expectations of students that they're not developmentally ready for. And then when students get frustrated, right, they tend to act out or whatever, behavior they do. And so a lot of times, the system has set the kids up for failure. At the same time, schools have to be given the ability to address discipline issues. We want to do what's best for the student who is choosing the poor behavior, but we also want to maintain the safety and the well-being of the rest of the students in class. And, there's also the teachers that, the student steps out for a minute, goes to talk to admin, and then comes back, with a lollipop and that sort of thing. All of that is connected to our school report card and how discipline is measured on that. The lack of training for administrators, the lack of understanding of all of those things. So it's a bunch of different pieces. I always talk about education as a spider web. It's a bunch of different pieces that connect to student, behavior and discipline that we as teachers in schools have very little control over, right? And so, we've got to sort of do that. Like, let's try everything. Let's try the restorative justice. Let's try, the retraining. Let's get the therapy. But at the end of the day, all of that also takes funding, and it takes teachers and school professionals in the classroom. So you cannot talk about student discipline without also talking about we don't have enough teachers in our schools and addressing that teacher shortage.
Thank you. Thank you both. I do want to make this as interactive as possible, and we have a question from Haley Williamson. She said, I'd like to know how both candidates view the lack of funding and support for special education classes, specifically self-contained. Special education teachers are always paying for life skill supplies out of their own pockets. Thank you, Haley, for the question. We'll go to Lisa this time. Start us off.
I think that is, that really sort of falls on, part of it falls on your school district and your school and how that they're channeling that funding through. All public schools need to be funded appropriately. And so that's part of it when you're trying to, it's like a dam bursting and you've got funding to cover this little hole and this little hole and this little hole. Also, with special ed classes, a lot of that funding comes from the federal government because of ADA and IDEA and all of that. So, I think that's not limited to just classes with teachers with special needs. I think the amount of money that all teachers that I know of, including myself, pay out of our pocket is something that does need to be addressed. And again, school funding is at the legislative level in terms of who you vote for in this go around the House. The South Carolina House, and then, the superintendent can work to reallocate some of that funding, but a lot of that drills down into the school district and the school level.
Thank you. Sylvia?
Yeah, so my goal is to reform special education here in South Carolina. So like I said, I'm working on my Doctor of Education at the University of South Carolina right now. And what I'm researching is how to improve the literacy rate of students in middle school students in the rural area who receive special services. And so as I'm doing my research and, having conversations with teachers in special education, the parents of students who receive special services, I realized what we're doing is working on one continuum of service. That means we're throwing all the students in to the mainstream and we're not providing those supports. And one of the things, being district coordinator, I had this conversation with my CFO, and there's money in these areas. The problem is the money is not being spent properly. Now, I'm not saying we can't use more money, because we can. But the issue is we're not having conversations with the teachers who are doing the job. We're not having conversations with the administrators, finding out what the needs are and how to be strategic about how we're spending money, and then oversight as well. So, and also federal funding. We're leaving a lot of federal funding on the table. So what I plan to do is continue to have those conversations with the teachers, like I've been doing, the families of students who have these special needs, the district superintendents, find out what the needs are, providing the resources, seeing how we can work together to provide the resources. For example, the question that was highlighted is one of the issues of how money isn't being allocated properly, because there's no reason why any special education, well, any teacher period, but especially in special education with the Title I funds that are received and funds received for special education period. And so that to me just signals there needs to be more oversight. We need to find out where this money is going and why is it not being used properly in these classrooms for students. So
the U.S. Department of Education last week, and if you are the South Carolina Superintendent of Education, presumably you're going to have to work with Linda McMahon's U.S. Department of Education. And last week for Teacher Appreciation Week, I'm sure you saw these. I'm going to put one of them up there. To teachers our mentors. This was Thursday's Teacher Appreciation Week post from the U.S. Department of Education. And at first I thought, this isn't real. This is somebody just being sarcastic.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, folks who don't know who this is, This is Miss Hoover from The Simpsons, who was Lisa Simpson's teacher, who had a nervous breakdown in class and who wasn't a very good teacher. And they're using these cartoon characters, and this is just, so there's so much that's bizarre about it that I don't even know where to begin. Like in the the cart first of all, choosing cartoons instead of real teachers, and then second of
Right.
all, there's no
Right.
diversity, and then it's also like just weird characters to choose. How do you, if you get in an office, how do you work with the US Department of Education run by a person who's really should be at the World Wrestling Entertainment, doing that work? How do you bridge that gap and work with Linda McMahon? And also, what were your thoughts on these graphics and what it says about respect for teachers? And we'll start with Sylvia.
Well, you said it. Like those graphics just show like the lack of respect for educators. I know my post when I was for Teacher Appreciation Week, I highlighted the teachers who impacted my life. And so I think those pictures highlight the fact that these people that are in these positions have no idea what it means to be a teacher, what it feels like to be a teacher or work in the system. Because I know how it feels because I was a classroom teacher. And so that's why I'm appreciative of the mentors, these teachers who helped me along the way. So one of the things that I will do as superintendent, what they're doing at the national level, that noise, I plan to focus on South Carolina, elevating and changing the narrative of our profession here in South Carolina. And one of the ways I want to do that is highlighting the great things that the teachers are doing all over this state, highlighting the programs that are being implemented all over this state, because there's so many great things happening in education here in South Carolina that's being overlooked by the book bans and all the things. So just changing the narrative of the profession, highlighting the positive things that teachers are doing is part of my goal for just restoring the respect and the professionalism to this position.
Thank you. Lisa?
I really find that post offensive. I'm right now, I'm not on social media because I don't have the time really to deal with it. But I think it is very typical of this administration, right? The goal of the administration has been to, and the goal of the Republican Party has been to dismantle public education by sowing distrust in public schools and distrust in teachers and all that. And that's a prime example of doing that, right? And it, again, like you said, it's coming from somebody who has, like at our own state level, no background in education, no experience in it, other than, I guess, attending school herself as K through 12. But we still have to work with her, right? And, you think about people that you have to deal with on a regular basis that you struggle with, right? You still got to find a way for open communication, for effective communication, and just do what is in the best interest of the students of South Carolina and continue to push for, the federal funding, continue to push for not dismantling the Department of Ed. But continue to have those conversations and push through, because at the end of the day, you've got to have that relationship. You've got to have that ability to have that communication open to be effective.
Thank you. So Ellen Weaver was brought up. Let's see if we can talk about, first of all, what would you give her first term? What grade would you give her first term?
Oh,
And what feedback? We're all educators here, so we've given grades and we've given feedback. So what grade would you give her, and what feedback would you give her if you could and you thought she would actually listen to that? We'll start with Lisa this time.
It's a loaded question, Todd.
It is.
I'm running for office again because she has not been effective, right? And I've seen the negative impact that she's had on, our teachers and our students. I feel that she has prioritized things that should not have been prioritized. I think that she has sort of turned a blind eye to things that were or are real problems and need to be addressed. And I think she's really worked hard to continue the narrative of dismantling public education by, pulling money away from it, by, eroding, again, the trust in teachers, by not allowing teachers to teach the standards and multi-perspective education and point of views and all of that. I think she would receive feedback? Well, probably not. I mean, I'm going to say an F.
Sylvia.
So I was going the F route too, but I might be a D minus. And the only reason why I say that, and that's being very generous with the D minus, but there are some things like implementing, she restored phonics in the schools. Now I'm totally with that. I'm an English teacher, right? And as far as phonics, the science of reading, being like strategic on teaching, implementing that. Now, the policies and stuff, how she went about it, that's a whole nother issue, especially the whole holding 3-year-olds back or third graders, that retention, and how the teachers had to like give up all this time for training and all that. So there are things that go along with it. My point is the fact that we have phonics back in the schools, that's a focus, is sort of what helped elevate it a little bit. And also, she's moving in the right direction as far as the phone ban. Now, being so restrictive as far as the state having that mandated control over it and all that, I think it should still stay at the local level. But the intention of it, because I remember being in the classroom and a student picked up her phone in the middle of my class. And I was like, oh my gosh, she was like, it's my mom. And so I'm thinking, something's going on. But it was just her mom telling her to ride the bus home. And so phones can be a distraction in the classrooms. And so removing, having that special space where there's no electronics, I am all for that. Now, again, how she went about implementing that, that's different. Because I know one of the things that I want to do is work to reduce screen time in our schools, because I feel there needs to be a balance. I was having a conversation the other day about screen time, how there was this one school I was at that was totally paperless and everything was on the computer, but we need a balance. We need to bring back that balance of, I know we can't get rid of technology, we have to balance it and bring back paper and pencil. Because one of the issues with this whole, just electronics is we have students who don't know how to write. They don't know how to read print. They don't know how to read cursive. So there's some negative effects that have come with just going straight to technology. So restoring that balance. But one of the things, some of the feedback I would give her is, the whole pay for performance. One of the things that she doesn't understand, because she was never a teacher, she was never in the education system, is, teachers, if you create this competitive culture, then you're pitting teachers, you're pitting educators against each other. And that collaborative team spirit that's needed, it goes away. Other teachers won't help other teachers because they're trying to get their scores up. And I'm speaking because I know personally a teacher who wouldn't help another teacher because they were competing for test scores. So I would advise her that instead of going that collaborative or that competitive route, paying teachers and saying this teacher is better than that teacher, that's why they're getting paid. My goal is to create a more collaborative culture in our schools. And that's part of one of my priorities to do that, changing the culture. And then some of the things like the book banning, bringing that to the state level. One of the advice I would give her is instead of listening to, these special interest groups, we need to listen more to the teachers, to the people who are on the ground level. And also restoring that local control, because that statewide book ban, that should never been a state issue. That this local school districts had their own policies for banning those books. And again, just the honesty, restoring honesty and trust. And I would let her know that honesty and trust, that's like the backbone but that's leadership. If she's been in any leadership position, she should know once you lose the trust of people, I mean, it's hard for people to respect you. And she barely had respect, if any, from educators, because she's never been a teacher yet. She's telling teachers, what to do and how to do stuff. So,
Yeah, I think this is one of the frustrating things. I think a lot of educators seeing someone like a Betsy DeVos or Linda McMahon,
mm,
people who not only haven't not only haven't been a leader in education, like a superintendent or a principal, but like haven't taught in a classroom, haven't
right.
in some cases haven't even attended a public school.
That, that,
So, and there's kids don't go to public school, so it's like and then to be led by someone like that, this just I don't know that this happens in other professions where like the surgeon general is just a plumber, a former wrestler or something like that, or someone in business. I just, it's sad and infuriating.
yeah,
I do
yeah.
want to shift to, you had brought up technology, Sylvia,
Mm,
and I think all of us are aware that AI, just over the past few years, has sort of exploded on the scene. And I think there's this allure of like, hey, can this help teachers with some of their tasks? Can it
mhm,
help make things a little bit easier for teachers and take off some of their workload? Is there a role for this in terms of instruction? And what I fear, I had a conversation with somebody, a deep level conversation around this, around there are cameras that can track eye movement. There are all kinds of technological devices that will keep kids on task.
mm,
And I think there is a growing lashback among young people in particular who see my future may be denied to me in terms of having a career because a lot of them are going to collapse, and as companies decide, hey, I can just get AI to do this, or robots. I don't have to pay them. I don't have to they never take a day off. They don't get sick. They don't talk back. They just do what
mhm,
I want them to do. And as this technology gets better and better and more powerful, and then into humanoid robotic form, one of the concerns I have is about the teaching profession. Like, are we going to hand over instruction to AI, and then you can kind of continue this deprofessionalizing teachers, the
mm,
teaching profession, like lower the bar and just have like somebody who can just make sure the kids are on their machines, make sure the kids don't fight each other, and you don't really need a degree, and we don't have to
mm.
pay them as much. So I'm saying a lot, but what do you see as the promise and the peril of AI in education? We'll start with Sylvia and then Elise.
Right. So you brought up a good point, because I remember, I don't know if you guys saw how the first lady brought out the robot, trying to, I guess, like hint at that robots would be replacing teachers. But I think one of the things that COVID has taught us is that students need teachers. They need that relationship. They need there are things that AI just can't replace. And part of that is that intuition. Like when you're a teacher, it's that with itness. I don't know if you remember in education,
Yeah.
that something robotic. And then I'm also thinking of, I was watching this video of this AI where it kept repeating the directions over and over again. And the kids, the middle school kids, how they asked like a million questions, and they were continued to ask the robot a million questions, and then the robot like just broke down because it just couldn't take, it was overloaded, right? But in all reality, it's going to be hard for a robot to really replace and do all the things that we do as educators, that impact, the role model, the mentorship. Because when people talk about robots being the teacher, they don't really understand what all teachers do, like our deep impact. And
Mm.
so in this position, this is why it's very important who we select as leaders for our education at every level. Anyone who influences education, because someone who's been in the school system, who would know that robots that should never replace the human, aspect of education. And you talked about how students feel like there are certain jobs that will be taken because of AI, and that is true. But again, part of leadership and part of what I want to do, because I want to form a AI advisory council, and part of that is seeing what are the dangers in AI, and how can we create regulations and put safeguards in place to protect, our students and teachers, but making sure that when AI is in place, people know how to use it. And going back to the jobs, because I got off track on that, but making sure that when it comes to the jobs, as the leaders, we know, because we can tell which jobs are going to go towards AI, like that are going to take over, and then which jobs, because AI can't do everything. There's still going to be jobs that we need human interaction with. I remember when I toured the BMW dealership, or not dealership, the BMW plant. There were AI robots, but there were also, the AI robots were like putting these frames of the BMW together. But as this car being constructed went through, there were human checks. So this system, having AI, cannot go without a human partnership.
Yeah.
And so AI, it's a tool, it's an assistant. And so those are all the things, if having those conversations, that I would bring up, and also having this advisory council where we are not trying to run away from the conversation of AI, that we have those conversations, create regulations, and leverage AI. That way it can benefit all of us, because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Thank you, Sylvia. Lisa?
There's a lot to that question. First and foremost, when we talk about teaching, I joke that everybody thinks that they can teach because they went to K through 12 school, and we've seen that that's not the reality because we're in a teacher shortage. Teaching is both an art and a science. The science part is knowing your content, and able to, give it to the kids. The art part is knowing how to deliver it. And that depends on the students that are in your class. That can change. I'm at a high school level, so that's going to change based on the classes throughout the day, classes each year, because the students are always going to be different. And so the idea that we can replace human teachers with a humanoid is a really scary thing, in the fact that that's not going to be effective. We Sylvia's right about the response to First Lady Trump's humanoid, where there was a lot of in social media about the memes of the humanoid running out of the middle school classroom with only one arm and one leg, because all of that. And so I think that that's not if that's the path that people are thinking is the way to fix education, that's the wrong path, because you cannot replace the skills, those soft skills that are needed to be a teacher, that critical thinking, that quick reaction time, that problem solving, that empathy to our students. Those are things that current AI doesn't have, and that's the part that as they're developing AI, they continue to have problems with. Right, it's the feelings piece, and I would argue that before you can teach any academics, you've got to connect to the student and building that relationship. And so that's why you need humans that care about each other. Right, that's the whole purpose of how we connect. So that's sort of what I think about humanoids as teachers. I really would kind of like to just sit on the back side of a mirror and watch a middle school classroom with one, just to see what happens. I think that would be really entertaining. Yeah. In terms of AI, just in general as a tool, it can be really helpful to teachers. That's what it is. It's another tool. I have used it to improve rubrics. That I took and created the rubric, and then put it into AI to say, hey, where are the problems with this? Where's the wording? But I'm using it as a tool with input and specific questions that I'm asking it, right? I think and I have a fully formed brain. That's the other piece that I talk about, is that I know how to use it as a tool, just like I would use, Google Sheets or Google Calendar. They're all tools to help me be a better teacher. The issue right now with AI in schools is that students don't know how to use it effectively and correctly.
Right.
And we are not doing a good job of teaching them how to use it effective and correctly. And also, a lot of the way that our testing is set up for content and not skill-based. And so, I think AI is forcing teachers to rethink how they assess their students. It's, no longer when was the War of 1812, it's why was it significant, right? And those are answers that are a little bit harder to find out in terms of how has it impacted, those sort of things. And so part of that is the Department of Education, in terms of academic standards, really needs to move away from content-based and more application. How is this effective? Because ultimately, we're preparing our students for a world that doesn't even exist yet. And so we've got to really focus on the fact that we've got to be developing skills that they can use regardless of what industries are out there, right? I'm talking about, critical thinking, problem solving, those soft skills or workplace skills. And the current landscape of how our schools operate is that those skills are being pushed to the wayside because of the high stakes testing. And
Right.
so, again, that's a report card issue, right? If we can change the way that we're testing, if we can change, the way that the standards are being addressed, then we can move those skills that students are going to need regardless of where they go, whether they're entering college, whether they're entering the military, whether they're entering the workforce. They have those skills to be able to be successful. We know that AI is taking over a lot of the assembly line jobs, those sort of jobs that you could get, as a high school graduate, or, those sort of things. And we're recognizing that is changing. And so we've got to do better with it. We've got to sit there and we've got to do much better in training teachers on how to use it effectively in their classrooms. We've got to train teachers how to teach their students to use it effectively in their classrooms. And at the end of the day, we've got to pull, and Sylvia mentioned it, we've got to pull screens away from students also, because when you're on a screen, you're not learning all of those soft skills that are so important. You're not learning how to get along with others. You're not learning, how to make your point without being rude and disrespectful about it. So, we've got a lot of work to do, and we need to start moving quickly on it, because it's not going away. It's only going to become more ingrained. And the technology is moving faster than we are in education, and we've got to rise up and meet that demand and get in front of it. And we continue to stay flat-footed on a lot of things and react rather than act proactively.
Yeah. I heard somebody refer to those skills as durable skills, and I really liked that term, durable, because those are the skills that, like you said, regardless of what the future holds for us, we need to have, honesty, integrity, the ability to get along with each other, good mental health skills, resiliency, all of those things that no matter what the technology brings 5, 10, 20 years from now, they need to be durable skills. So I appreciate that. We had Jean Reed, who's a member of the SCEA and on our board. Jean, how are you doing? Jean brought this up, and I feel like this is a topic that as we discuss education issues, we often overlook, and I think it's really important. So she asked, what would you do to increase educational support professionals pay, or as we call them, ESPs? And, this is something that when I go out and visit folks in schools and I talk to folks like who are working in the cafeteria or who are driving buses and doing that important work, especially with the way the costs of things have gone up, their pay hasn't really kept up. I mean, it's bad enough for teachers, but for our ESPs, their pay is not kept up, and I can imagine how challenging it is even working full time, trying to keep up in the economy today. So, what would you have to say to Gene? And we'll start with Lisa this time.
Yeah, that's a great question. Any adult who engages with students every single day deserves to be paid well. But that is, again, that's a question with a lot of layers, because that is determined at the district level. When you look at how districts or salaries are funded, most of it, you've got the teacher salary schedule at the state level, but then the rest of it sort of is determined by the district level. A couple ways that you've got to address that is you've got to make sure that the funding, that again, we're getting more funding to then funnel to the district level, but you've got to focus on that local funding. We talked about equity a lot, or I've talked about equity a lot as I've traveled the state, in terms of, you've got somebody like a Charleston County that has a ton of local funding right next to a Dorchester or Berkeley or a Hampton or a Jasper that doesn't. And so somehow we've got to make that a little bit more equitable, with the funding getting down. So those, other than the teachers, so those adults who are interacting with students can see that pay increase. The other piece of it is, it depends on your school district. For example, the school district that I'm in, they outsource cafeteria and custodial. And so the district really contracts with the company, but doesn't have any control over, the salary that those employees earn. And so that's why I continue to say it's a district level where the superintendent of education can influence and can work to reallocate money into different pots depending on how it's being used currently. But those are conversations that need to be handled at the district level, the school board level. The bus drivers, that's a little bit of a different scenario because of the state. And I mean, our bus drivers should be getting paid millions, because who wants to drive a multi-ton bus with a bunch of middle school students on it? I'm sorry to the middle school students that are listening.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is, we're not paying them enough because they get their 6 months, 12 months experience as a bus driver, and then they're hired away to run long haul routes. And so we've really got to work to increase all of those salaries, because those are vital to the well-being of our students and how well our schools are run.
Thank you. Sylvia.
So my plan is to work with the General Assembly to not only increase teacher pay, but to also increase the pay for our ESP, for bus drivers, for cafeteria workers, custodians. And part of that, what was mentioned, is a lot of these services have been outsourced. But how can we work with these companies to provide incentives for this collaborative relationship to increase the pay of our bus drivers? Because one of the biggest issues we're having in the rural area is we don't have enough bus drivers for routes. I remember having to wait in the gym an hour after school because we didn't have enough bus drivers. So that's enough of, right there, a push to start having these collaborative conversations to advocate for funding, or if it's outsourced, talk to these companies. How can we as a state provide incentives to these companies to pay the bus drivers more, to pay the custodians more, to pay the cafeteria workers more, to pay our paraprofessionals more, to pay child care development workers more? Because part of my early childhood education plan is to pay our child care development workers more. So anyone who's working with children, who's working in our schools, who is part of helping to grow students, to help prepare them for the future, everybody needs to be paid more. And if, let's say, we can't get more pay for, with the paycheck, what incentives can we provide? What stipends can we provide to help support everyone who's working with our children? So
Right.
there are ways we can be creative, not necessarily if it's, if we can't increase salary, there are other ways we can help support financially every area, every profession that touches education.
Mm. All right. Thank you. This is the last topic, and then I'm going to give you both a chance to close.
Mhm.
So Haley asked this, and this is a huge issue. We're seeing these voucher schemes, uh,
Mm.
take off, and she says, "Do you believe voucher or scholarship programs weaken traditional public schools or strengthen educational opportunity, and why?" So, what are your thoughts on vouchers, and what would you do as superintendent? We'll start with Sylvia.
Yes, so that's a great question. The one I want to start out with vouchers is it's very important to remember that the vouchers go against our state constitution. Public funds belong or are allocated for, should be allocated for public schools, not private Christian institutions. That's our state constitution. And it was challenged in 2024. So, and it was struck down as unconstitutional. So this new voucher bill, there's a chance that it will be again ruled unconstitutional if it's challenged, but right now it's not. But the question was, does it weaken public education? The answer is yes. And the reason why it does is it's taking money away from our public schools. We see that in Greenville. We see that in Richland 1, how positions are being cut because enrollment is going down. So as this enrollment decreases, that's funding. And with that funding being gone, again, it's taken away programs. It's taken away not only programs, but those extra assistants, those teachers or assistants that are there to support. So I compare it to like a car. If you have a car and you take the wheels off the car, right? The whole purpose of a car is to get you where you need to go. But if you take the wheels off the car, can the car do what its function is supposed to do? That's what we're doing with education. We are taking the wheels off the car with public education. We're saying that, oh, public education is so bad, but yet we're not giving it the full, we're not giving it the tires it needs to really go forward. So
Thank
as
you.
state superintendent of education, my plan is to fully fund public education. And what I mean by that is having those conversations, finding out what the needs are, the resources, and then providing that, being strategic about how we spend money and support, because each area is different.
Lisa?
Public funding should not go to any organization that does not have the same transparency and accountability measures. And that's one of the problems that we're seeing is that these for-profit charter schools, these private schools, these parochial schools are not held to the same standards and accountability, and so we don't know how the money is being spent. The other issue with other than just losing funding for public schools, because remember the purpose of public school is to educate students, but to create a civilized society, right? So why would you want to take money away from that main goal? We live in a connected society where we have to work together. We have to learn to recognize and respect each other's differences. And that's what public schools do, because they accept anybody who comes into their school. And so to me, that is the true beauty of public school, is that we aren't all the same there. We're all different, and we learn how to interact with each other, and we learn how to be respectful, and we learn how to say, okay, you and I disagree on that, and that's okay. And so, when you take those opportunities for students away, you're really hurting, our ultimate society. The other piece of the way that vouchers and funding with this is working in South Carolina is it's not helping the students that need the most help. When you look at the fact that people can apply for vouchers who have who are 400% above poverty, like that's the qualification, that's not our highest need students. Those are students that are already in alternative schools that are simply now their families are just able to pocket more money because of that. So if we truly want to provide educational opportunities for our most vulnerable, then we have to limit the amount of money or the amount of people that are receiving it. And that's not what it's about. Again, I go back to the purpose of it is to dismantle public education, right? So when you cut funding or when you move funding to other sources, then you're causing all of these problems, and you're causing, more teachers to leave because they're not receiving the supports they need. You're, leading to bigger classrooms. You're leading to, more student issues. And so again, when we look at the why behind the what, we have to understand that it's not just about, oh, we want little Lisa Ellis to go. Hello?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
You blipped out there for a second. The
I was like, oh no, what
the
happened?
simulation glitched for a second, but we're back.
And so, part of that is with the superintendent of education is, making sure that the money that the Department of Ed receives and that schools receive is going to be used in the best way, that it's being used appropriately, but also having those conversations with the General Assembly to make sure that the funding is going to public schools that are being held to a high standard and a standard that, is producing success. And so it just, that's a whole other spider web of topic.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up to the end of our time. It's a little after 8. I know y'all are probably tired and busy. I do want to give you one last question, just give you an opportunity to make a brief final statement and share your website and how folks can connect with your campaign if they want to learn more about you and maybe how they can donate or how they can get involved. So we'll start with Lisa there and wrap things up with Sylvia.
Thank you. Todd, this has been really a great discussion. I appreciate the questions, and especially the questions from the audience. Again, my name is Lisa Ellis. The website is ellisforsc.com. You can learn all about me and how to support the campaign. Like I said, I've been in the trenches for 25 years now, and I've seen some of my greatest friends who are fantastic teachers leave. And that hurts my heart because it hurts our students, but I don't begrudge them at all because, you at some point you can't do it anymore. But that's my goal. My goal is to become superintendent of education and really work to, change the narrative that is happening in our public schools in South Carolina, but to also fix these systems that have been broken for so long and get the focus back onto the students. I always tell people every decision that I make will be to answer the question, how is this in the best interest of our students? How does this help shape our students' future? And that will be the focus of my term in office. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa, and good luck with the wrapping up the school year. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sylvia.
So again, my name is Sylvia Wright, and I've not only been in the trenches, I've actually had leadership experience. And that's what qualifies me as the best candidate for this position. Because to run an agency, it requires leadership, management, and judgment. Leadership, building capacity, building relationships with others, management, managing funding, systems, programs, initiatives, and then judgment, looking at that data. And not just testing data, but data that comes from talking to the teachers, the administrators, the students, using that to provide the resources that are needed. And I've done all of these things. Like I said, I've been that classroom teacher, the department leader, instructional coach, school coordinator, and district coordinator. I have the perspective on every single, and that's what's needed when we talk about, running a whole agency. It's not just about advocacy. It's about running a whole agency. And I have the experience, and I have not only the educational experience, but the hands-on experience. I've improved systems. And so learn more about me at Wright2026sc.com. I need volunteers, I need donations, but most importantly, I need your vote on June 9th. Thank you again, Todd, for this opportunity.
I just want to sincerely thank you both. There have been times when I've thought about running for office, and I don't think I have the constitution for that. Not only the amount of work that needs to go into it, but the amount of criticism and just putting yourself out there and vulnerability. Because no matter what you say, there's gonna be people who don't like it, and just putting yourself out there in the public like that. I just want to say I applaud you and honor your courage and your willingness to put yourself out there. And all I can say to you tonight is I wish you both nothing but the best. And I look forward to seeing what happens in June. And no matter what happens, I'll be behind whoever comes out the victor. But thank you both for your time and for
Thank you.
everything that you do, whether you win or lose. Thank you for what you're doing for education in South Carolina.
Thank you, Todd.
All right. All right. All right, everybody. That was Lisa Ellis and Sylvia Wright. And I just want to put their websites up there one more time. For Lisa, if you want to learn more about Lisa, you go to ellisforsc.com. And if you want to learn more or support Sylvia, go to Wright. A couple of things coming up. First of all, if you enjoyed tonight's live stream and you'd like to learn more about the SCEA, the only union for educators in South Carolina, including our education support professionals, we're the only association that has that makes room for all of our support professionals. So if you are driving a bus, if you are a custodian, if you are working in the cafeteria or the front office, or if you're an administrator or a classroom teacher, you can join the SCEA right now at no cost at jointhescea.org until September. So you would join now in May, and no dues would come out until September. So give us a try right now. Check it out. It's the best time to join is right now. And go to jointhescea.org to learn more. My partner in crime at Cool is Dr. Marcella Weinsnyder, and she and Angie Brush and Stephanie Johnson will be holding their final Cool coaching session of the year. I think tomorrow is their last night. So if you are an induction teacher and you're looking for support as you go through these final crazy weeks of school, make sure to do this. It's free. It's online. You don't have to be a member of the SCEA. You just log on anytime between 6 and 8 o'clock at cool.us/coaching, and you can get the support that you need at no cost. And coming up, we talked about AI. I'm going to have a conversation with AI, or at least I'm going to try to, on May 27th. That's 2 weeks from tonight at 6 o'clock. I will be interviewing AI, and it isn't going to be an experiment. It's going to be wild. I don't know how it's going to go. Don't hold me accountable for anything AI says, because the other day I asked, and you can do this experiment with ChatGPT. So if you have ChatGPT, go ask how many E's are in the letters or in the word 17. And this was just like a week or two ago. It said 2, and I said, no, I think there's 4. And it said, oh no, I think you're right. It's 4. I said, wait a second. I thought about it some more. I think it's 5. I said, oh, my bad. You're right. There's 5 E's. And I said, no, I think you were right in the first time. It's 2. And they're like, yep, you're right. It's 2. So that's crazy. So that made me realize, what else is it confidently saying to you is correct and is completely incorrect. So I want to encourage everybody to check out that live stream. And you can, of course, always check everything that we do, like tonight's live stream. If you're just tuning in and you're on Facebook and you're like, oh, I missed it, you can always go back and watch it on Facebook on the SCEA's channel or Cool's channel. But you can also, we'll edit it and post it to the Cool website at cool.us. All the live streams we've ever done are on this website. They're housed on this website. You can find them all. There's tons of great resources, tons of videos on there for you to check out. I had someone call me today and told me how meaningful the one we did with Matt Bowerman on trauma-informed schools was. Had someone talk to me about the one we did with Dr. LaShanta McCrae-Sarvis on leadership and resilience. So just check out all of those. They're pretty cool. No pun intended. And just again, thank you so much to Sylvia and Lisa. And I really mean this. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of inner strength to run for an office like that, especially in an environment, in a political environment like this, where there's just so much animosity and vitriol, lies and misinformation, mischaracterizing people's positions and what they stand for. It is has got to be an incredibly stressful and difficult thing. And these two educators are standing up, and we should applaud and support them and thank them for doing that, for sacrificing their time, their peace, to try and lead and to try to do the right thing for schools in South Carolina. So thank you, Sylvia, and thank you, Lisa, for your leadership. And thanks to everybody who tuned in tonight. I also that was like Karen and Cindy and Yvonne and Haley and Ryan and Ernest and Jenny and Kat and Jean. Thank you to and Mev and Bubba and Ticey. Thanks to everybody who tuned in tonight's live stream. And I do want to say this one final thing. Ellen Weaver, if you happen to hear this or see this, or if somebody who knows her happens to hear or see this, the invitation is open. I would love to have a conversation with you. It's not going to be an antagonistic conversation, but it will be one where I ask you some questions, and some of those may be tough questions. But I'd love to learn more about what you're thinking. I'd like to try to understand you better. I'd like us to try to understand each other better, and to just have a open and authentic and peaceful conversation where we just battle on ideas and share ideas, and maybe we'll find common ground and maybe we won't. But I think that we need to start having these conversations across the aisle and across sort of ideologies and philosophies, and we need to be able to sit down and talk with each other and listen to each other and try to learn from each other. So, Ellen, if you are up for it, check your inbox. I sent you an invitation, and I also sent it to you on Facebook. So, again, thanks to everybody tuning in tonight. Thanks again to Sylvia and Lisa, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for a conversation with AI. Until then, y'all have a great rest of your week, and as at least hectic wind down to your school year as possible. Just a few more weeks, and summer's coming. So y'all hang in there.